And we're live. We're doing a quick informal waiver wire video. I usually do it through TikTok and pull out some cool images and do things like that. But in all honesty, just want to get through it. Not feeling the best right now, but still want to get out that info. So waiver wire winners heading into week 16. All of these guys are rostered in under 50% of ESPN leagues. So I look at ESPN just as a base point, but all guys, again, rostered in under 50% of leagues. Some guys a little bit more than others here. So we'll kick things off, and I got the screen here. AJ Green, more of a deeper league guy, but 18 targets in his last two games. He had 17.2 fantasy points in week 14. So decent volume there. Christian Kirk and Zach Ertz had more targets last game, but he still is getting some now that DeAndre Hopkins is out. And if we haven't seen anything good out of him recently, then I wouldn't put him on the list. But just 2 weeks ago, he had that 17.2 week outing. Next on the list, Gabriel Davis, who had a really, really nice game this past week. 15 targets and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He had 15.3 and then that big 25.5 fantasy week. They may be without Cole Beasley now and Emmanuel Sanders, which would bump his stock even more. We know he can score. We know the opportunity is there for targets. So I think he's got a decent opportunity for a bigger day. Try to get these to look similar here. All right, next guy on the list, Justin Fields. And I don't want to be a big homer or anything along those lines, but Justin Fields in his last 4 games has been a top 10 quarterback in all 4 of them. 4 straight games with top 10 performances. I think now is the time to play him if you stream your quarterback. Now, if you have a top guy that's been pretty consistent, maybe not. The Seahawks are not the best matchup in the world, but he's been good. He's got the rushing upside. We know he can use his legs. 6 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Good sign too. He just needs to limit the turnovers. So these top 10 performances would have been even better if he didn't turn over the ball. So I do like Justin Fields. I went in order by team here. So I'm also going to throw Cole Kmet on the list just because lately we've seen a handful of good games for him for the tight end position. 14.7 week 9, 14.5 in week 12, and then this last game 13.1. So he's had 3 games as of recent within that 13 to 14 point range. I think that's pretty good for the tight end position. Much better with his yardage too. I know the big knock for me personally for Cole Kmet was that he would catch some passes, but would only go for like 30, 40 yards. He just had 71 yards this past week, 9 targets too. So the targets are there. The yards are decent. I like the opportunity for him to be streamed and put into lineups now that he's seeing decent targets and seeing some decent yardage. Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't have the best game last week, but there's a lot of positives to him. There's guys missing. I don't know completely the status of everybody. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. It's giving me some OCD. But 15 targets the last 2 games. So the targets are there. We know that this guy can take 1 catch to the house. He's got tons of speed. And now that he has an increase in targets, that's even more of an opportunity for him to have a bigger day, big yardage day. We've seen Donovan Peoples-Jones this season score 26.1, 16.6, and 14 fantasy points. So he's had some decent weeks this season. Now he's getting some targets. So I still think he is a decent option. I'm on Ross St. Brown. Absolute dog the last 3 weeks. I mean, this guy's been very, very good for fantasy. And at first, you saw the 12 targets. I was just talking to Kevin about this on the live stream. But at first, you saw the 12 targets, and you're like, could have just been a bigger week for him. But it's been 3 weeks in a row now 12, 12, and 11 targets the last 3 games. He had 86, 73, and 90 receiving yards in those games. So it's not like he is getting a bunch of short yardage gains. He's actually getting some decent targets for pretty good yardage. 24.8, 15.3, and 23.5 fantasy points the last 3 games. He is a must pick up guy at this point because the targets are there, the yardage is there, the fantasy points are there. The one thing to watch, though, that I'd be concerned about is Jared Goff. He is on the COVID list, so you want to make sure that he plays. If it's the backup, then I think your Optimism might, come down a little bit on Amon-Ra, but he's definitely a good pickup. Justin Jackson, another guy to consider this week. Justin Jackson, when looking at the situation with the Chargers, Austin Eckler just hit the COVID list as well. So you have to, with these COVID news that come out, you have to just make sure guys do or do not play, because some guys hit the COVID list, they don't play. Some guys hit the COVID list and they get cleared. So it just comes down to if he's going to play or not. If Eckler plays, you're not touching Justin Jackson. He's not going into your lineups. But last game, 13 carries for 86 yards. So he was the best running back, not named Austin Eckler, when it comes to that backfield. So if Eckler is out of the picture, he could pass catch as well. And he was getting most of the carries when Eckler was out of the picture. So he would be the next man up. KJ Osborne, another guy, had a down week, but I still think he could be of some value, especially since he is the starter for the Vikings with Adam Thielen out of the picture right now. I get these little OCD problems, so I want to fix this so it looks better. So KJ Osborne, down week, but 7 and 9 targets the last 2 games. I'm sorry, but 2 weeks prior to this last game, he only had like 3 targets in this last game. The 2 weeks prior, he had 7 and 9 targets, and those games were for 14.7 and 17.3 fantasy points. So if we wipe the last game, the 2 games prior, he was good. The targets we've seen be there. A little bit more of a down game for the Vikings against the Bears. It wasn't this huge scoring week. He's going to get targets, and I still think he is a flex option. Hunter Henry for the tight end position is really a boom or bust kind of guy. I mean, he's had a lot of down weeks, but we just saw this last game. He had 2 touchdowns, and he has 9 on the year, 8 targets in that game. So looking at some of the weeks he had before, he's had 3 games, I believe, this season above 19 fantasy points. So we know that he can hit that mark. It's probably dependent if he scores a touchdown. But if you are potentially chasing a matchup and you know that he can score 1 or 2 touchdowns in any given week, I think he's a guy that you may want to consider that. Jeff Wilson Jr. needs to be picked up. I think he's just under 50%. Elijah Mitchell is out this week for sure. This last game, he had his best game when he actually was getting the touches. I think 2 games ago when he was healthy, he got the start and didn't. I mean, he had like 19 carries, didn't do much. But in this game, 21 carries for 110 rushing yards and a touchdown, 19.9 fantasy points. That looked good. He's the starter. Elijah Mitchell will not play. He should be picked up. This is one of the bigger pickups of the week. Right along with this next guy, Ronald Jones. So Ronald Jones, Rojo, he's next in line. Leonard Fournette is doubtful. I thought there was some rumors he might hit the IR. Ronald Jones getting 15 to 17 touches in the Tampa Bay offense is very different than other guys and other offenses getting, 20 touches, just because the Buccaneers offense, when you game plan against them, the whole game plan is not going to be, slow down Rojo if he gets the start. It's going to be to not let Tom Brady pick them apart. So I think Ronald Jones is a great pickup this week. He's probably the number one, on sleeper trends, but he should see 15 to 17 touches, and that should equal a good day in a really good offense, even if they're missing Evans and Godwin potentially, which leads me to Tyler Johnson. More of a deeper league sort of guy, but if Mike Evans does not play in this game, we know Chris Godwin is out because of the ACL injury. Tyler Johnson might have a good opportunity at hand. He had 7 targets last game from Tom Brady. Brady's going to need to throw the ball somewhere, and he's going to be wanting to bounce back after a terrible game last week. And 7 targets from Tom Brady is very different than 7 targets to a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. So Tyler Johnson, to me, is a guy that you could consider probably a deeper league guy. But if they're missing Evans now too, then he might be a must pickup because he's going to have the opportunity to have 7 and 9 targets in this game. Last one, it might be more of a stash. Jared Patterson. So Patterson in this last game, he had 4 carries and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson didn't practice today because of that turf. I'm not going to say turf, though, toe injury. Jared Patterson would be the next guy up. If he's a starting running back, you're going to want to roster him. And depending on what you're working with, we've had so many running back injuries this year. Maybe he makes your lineup. But I think anytime a guy is the starter, regardless if you use him or not, go and grab him because you don't want your opponent who might need a running back more to go and grab Jared Patterson. So might be more of a stash play. Really depends on what's going on with Antonio Gibson, but there's a chance he's the starter if Gibson was to miss this week. So that's a guy to consider. Looking at this list, I'd probably say, for me personally, this would probably be the order for me. We'll make this small so we can actually see it. I'd say these are my top 3 priority guys for this week. I'd say Ronald Jones, Amon-Ra St. Brown, really depending on if Jared Goff is the starter, and then Jeff Wilson Jr. So, if you are in a league with guys that are inactive at this point who are not competing, you might have the upper hand if they are available. If they're not available, then you might start to look down this list. I might go as to say number 4 might be Gabriel Davis, especially if Beasley and Sanders are both out. So looking at this list, I'd probably put him as 4, in all honesty. But good luck this week. If you are in the playoffs, stay active on the waiver wire, especially. You can block your opponent if they are needing one of these players. Otherwise, good luck. Get that dub and make sure you get to that championship game. Thanks for tuning in, guys.